Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Mullins, Executive Director at the Marion Chamber of Commerce, and we'd like to welcome you to this morning's presentation on the latest updates to the PPP program, Payroll Protection Program. Before we get started, this workshop is going to be recorded so we can have it available for if you want to watch it later. If you get called away, we got you covered. Or there are some folks who've registered that are unable to show up today, so we'll make sure that they can take advantage of this later. We will ask that everybody stay muted during the presentation until we get to the Q&A session at the end, but you're more than welcome to use the chat box to enter in questions so that Darrah can see if you have specific questions and if it's going to be dealt with later in the presentation, or just so she can prep answers for the Q&A. We are very excited to have Darrah Perryman with us to facilitate this morning's program. Darrah works for the U.S. Small Business Administration as an outreach and marketing specialist. She works out of the SBA's Illinois District Office to support businesses in all stages of their entrepreneurial journey throughout Illinois. Darrah has been with the SBA since May of 2020, and I have to say that's a very unique time to start at an organization. So we'd like to welcome Darrah, and you can take control of the screen at any time.
Great. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm excited to share an update on the Paycheck Protection Program. I will touch on PPP, but I also will try to mention our other programs. I think they're important just because participating in one program may impact your eligibility for other programs. So I will touch on that, but I will try to keep the bulk of today's webinar about PPP because I know that's a big topic right now. So if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put them in the chat. I think we're going to address those questions at the end. So just be patient as we move through the webinar. So a quick agenda, we're going to talk about where we are in terms of the new stimulus package and what was in it and the intent behind it. And then we'll move into the funding options that are out there. The Paycheck Protection Program, EIDL, and Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is also available. And then finally, we'll move into our grant program areas. We do have 2 grants at the SBA. Those programs are being rolled out right now, so I'll touch on those. And then finally, I'll talk about additional assistance and resources. You may hear me reference our resource partners several times throughout the webinar. We work very closely with resource partners. They are stationed throughout communities in Illinois. They're a wonderful place to start if you need assistance applying for Paycheck Protection Program or any of our other programs, and are a free resource for you. So I may mention those as well, just as an FYI. So where we are, when Congress reconvened in December, they created the Economic Aid Act, as you're aware, and it provided stimulus and business relief for our small businesses. And their intent behind that was really to try and support our hardest hit small businesses, our smaller small businesses, and those in our underserved communities, including women, minorities, and veterans. So here at the SBA, we've tried to keep that in mind and prioritize our smaller lenders. We've also tried to prioritize our community development financial institutions that typically also serve underserved communities. So when you look at the rollout of PPP, that was the intention. I think it's important just to mention this as we talk about the other programs and understanding what the eligibility is and criteria, just keeping in mind that the intent is to try and support our smallest small businesses and our hardest hit small businesses. So I'll touch now on Paycheck Protection Program, and I don't have the background here on the slide, but I just want to give a little background for maybe those who aren't aware, just so we're on the same page. So what the Paycheck Protection Program is, it was launched back in March 2020 with the CARES Act, and what it did, it provided small business owners, independent contractors, and sole proprietors. I'll get into eligibility here in a little bit, but it provided forgivable loans to those that were suffering during the pandemic. And it was the intent of the Paycheck Protection Program was to keep employees on payroll throughout the pandemic. So a big misconception about PPP is that you would go directly and apply through the SBA, but that is actually not the case. For Paycheck Protection Program, you will actually apply through a PPP lender. We have a full list on our website, and I will also demo how to find a PPP lender. There's a couple ways to do it, but that's how you would actually get started with the program. So essentially, the program kicked off, as I said, in March. It was very successful and again supported small businesses in keeping their employees on payroll throughout the pandemic. And then in August of 2020, the program did close. So when Congress reconvened in December, they did allocate funding for a second round of the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's where we are right now. We are in the midst of a second rollout, and I'm going to touch on the revamping of the program and some key changes that have been added. So one of the biggest changes or updates, I should say, is expanded eligibility and how funds can be used. So in order to have this loan forgiven, which is the ultimate goal, we want to help people get this loan forgiven. It's a forgivable loan, but you have to use the proceeds accordingly. So 60% of your loan proceeds should cover payroll costs, and then that other 40% should cover eligible non-payroll costs. And so if you follow that breakdown, and then another key point in order to get this loan forgiven is following your covered period. So back in 2020, when the program was open, borrowers had either an 8-week covered period or a 24-week covered period. This time around, we tried to give folks more flexibility. So you actually have at a minimum 8 weeks to use your funds, and then at a maximum 24 weeks to use your funds. So you really want to make sure you're following that covered period. So that was a big change. And then another huge change with the program is offering a second draw PPP loan for our hardest hit small businesses. So I'll get into that in a minute, but what that essentially means is that if you received a Paycheck Protection Program loan last year, you've used all the funds, and then you meet other additional criteria, you could be eligible for a second PPP loan. Another huge update with the stimulus is there's actually a simplified forgiveness form coming. So again, the goal of this program is to get it forgiven. So after you use your loan proceeds, you will apply for forgiveness. Right now, there's a few different forms out there, depending on how you use the proceeds and what rules you use or use to follow to use the proceeds. So forgiveness is another aspect of the program, and we do at the Illinois District Office, I believe we have a couple different webinars on forgiveness. After this today, I'd be happy to send a follow-up email with that recording if you want to check that out. But the huge update that is that a simplified forgiveness form is coming for those with loans of up to $150,000. And that was actually about 86% of the loans last year. So that we don't have that now, but that is coming. Some folks are waiting for it, but if you don't want to wait, as I said, there are other forms out there that you can submit. And then finally, a huge update. So the EIDL advance is no longer deducted from PPP loan forgiveness. So what the EIDL advance was, it was a one-time emergency grant up to $10,000 that was given to small business owners who applied for it, and it was launched again with the CARES Act and that CARES Act funding. So you would apply, and you applied when you were being considered for the economic injury disaster loan, which I will touch on that later, but that is a low interest working capital loan for businesses impacted by COVID-19. So along with that, you could have received a grant. Now, if you did receive that grant, it was deducted from your PPP loan forgiveness amount. So essentially, it would be, paying back that grant. But Congress, when they reconvened, they amended that rule, so that is no longer the case. Anyone who had their advance amount deducted from their forgiveness already, you should begin working with your lender, because their lenders are receiving guidance on how to rectify that. So it's another huge update with that. So let's talk about what is a first draw PPP loan. So first draw PPP loan is going to be for eligible applicants that did not receive a PPP loan prior to August 9, 2020. That again was when the program closed last year. So I'll touch on eligibility in the next slide, but there's been some additional entities that are now eligible for the program. Covered eligible expenses have been expanded. So as I said, 60% of those loan proceeds should be used to cover payroll, 40% for eligible non-payroll costs, but there's a couple of new additions now. Number one is now an included cost or included expense that can be forgiven, worker protection expenditures. So if, for example, you needed to add a drive-through area or ventilation area or sneeze guards, PPE, things like that, that is now an eligible expense that you can use for forgiveness. Another update would be if your business was impacted by any of the protests over the summer and your insurance isn't covering any of that property damage, you could use your PPP loan proceeds to cover that. Make sure to work with your lender on providing that documentation, but that has been an updated eligible use of proceeds now. And another note, some folks may want to consider this. So certain borrowers may request an increase to their original PPP loan amount. So what that means is last year, if you received a PPP loan, let's say for whatever reason, you didn't accept the full amount that you were eligible. Maybe you didn't think you could spend it all within that covered period, or maybe you just didn't want to take on that much. So for whatever reason, you didn't accept the full amount you were fully eligible for. Now you can go back to your lender and ask for an increase. Now, why might you do that versus just applying for a second PPP loan? You would do that because in order to qualify for a second Paycheck Protection Loan, there's additional criteria you must meet, and that's going to be our next slide here. So you may not qualify for a second Paycheck Protection Program loan, or maybe you don't need as much funds as the second Paycheck Protection Program loan would give you, so you'd rather just have an increase. Now, again, that's only if you didn't receive the full amount you were eligible for. If you did, then if you received that full amount you were eligible for, then you would just need to apply for a second one. Now, how do you calculate your maximum loan amount? Another great question. So you're going to use your either 2019 or 2020 payroll costs and times that by 2.5. In a few minutes, I'll take you to our website and a document, and I'll go through some different scenarios. There's a wonderful document on our website that goes over calculating your maximum loan amount by business type. But essentially that's the gist of it. Your lender makes the ultimate call on how much you are awarded, but that's the calculation that they follow. Another huge requirement, and I don't think I mentioned this, you must have been in business by February 15th, 2020. Now we get this question all the time, what if you started your business after that? Or, with the pandemic, so much in our world has changed. Maybe you started a business and have met the need of your community in a new way. So unfortunately, you can't apply for PPP if you started after that date. However, I wouldn't let that discourage you because the SBA has several other startup lending programs for startup businesses or a newer business that have been in operation under 2 years. So we have a micro lending program that provides up to $50,000 to our startup small businesses. We also have a 7A working capital loan program. We have a 5041 if you're looking to expand or purchase real estate. So there are other options out there. I don't want anyone that's a startup to feel, that there's no other option for them. Just because Paycheck Protection Program may not be for you, we do have other ones. And finally, a big note, if you're interested in Paycheck Protection Program, you must apply on or before March 31st. 2021. So after you apply, your lender has 10 days to disperse funds. So if you're on the line thinking about this program, I would advise you to begin those conversations and do your research now rather than wait, because you just want to make sure you're in and you apply before that deadline. So first draw eligibility, so newly eligible with the revamping of the program. So housing cooperatives are now eligible. Destination marketing organizations are now eligible. And now our certain 501(c)(3)s are eligible, including our chambers of commerce. And now some eligible news organizations can apply. Still eligible on this bottom group, they were eligible the first time and they're eligible now still. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals, business entities, partnerships, corporations, LLCs. The big thing with businesses, you want to ensure that you are a small business. So typically, a small business is defined as a business with 500 or less employees. However, if you have 500 or more employees, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a small business. What you'll want to do is go to sba.gov/size and just verify that you are a small business. It may be based in your industry. It could have a revenue requirement attached to it, and that could be what defines you as a small business, or it could be a number of employees that defines you as a small business. So just make sure to check, do your research. And additionally, our nonprofits are eligible, veterans organizations, and tribal businesses are still eligible. Okay, second draw PPP loan. So if you received a PPP loan last year, use the funds, and now you want a second one. So as I said, there's additional criteria that must be met to qualify. So 3 big things. Number 1, you must have previously received a Paycheck Protection Program loan, and you must have used all the loan proceeds or will have used all the loan proceeds before you get your second loan. So I'll break that down a bit more in the next slide. The second big requirement, you must have 300 employees or less. So now remember, on the first draw PPP loan, there's no employee requirement. You just have to be a small business. For the second draw PPP loan, it is 300 or less employees. And finally, you must have suffered a 25% reduction in gross receipts in comparable quarters of 2019 versus the same quarters in 2020. So I'll break that down a little bit more in the next slide. I know that's a lot to take in. So as I said, calculating your maximum loan amount, it's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost from either 2019 or 2020. You can choose. For second draw, up to 2 million. For the first draw, it's up to 10 million is your maximum. Now, a little bit different here. For our borrowers in the accommodation and food services field, or NACS code 72, if you're in that industry, your second PPP loan is going to be calculated a bit different. It's going to be 3.5 times your average monthly payroll cost. Instead of that 2.5, it's 3.5 for those in the food and accommodation field. But again, they still have that $2 million cap. So let's break those requirements down a little bit more. So the first one, you has used or will have used the full PPP loan amount only for eligible expenses before the second draw loan is dispersed. So we get this question a lot. So could you theoretically apply for a first draw now and a second draw before March 31st? So you could have, if you would have applied for your first draw loan at the end of January, because remember, you must use that covered period. That covered period at a minimum is 8 weeks long. So if you applied at the end of January and had your loan dispersed at the end of January, bringing you to 8 weeks would bring you to the end of March. Remember that the program closes on March 31st. So the end of March, you could then apply for a second PPP loan. However, there is a tight window to do that, and that math must add up because, again, you cannot overlap your covered period. So that's important for those who've started that process and want to try and line it up. But for most folks who received a loan last year, that first requirement should be easy to check. You just have to have used all of your first loan proceeds. Another note, you do not have to have had your first loan forgiven. You just have had to already use those loan proceeds. And again, must have been used for allowable expenses. You couldn't have used that money to renovate or to expand. It must have been used for, again, those payroll costs and eligible non-payroll costs. That includes things like your rent and mortgage, utility bills. And then another big one is pretty straightforward, has no more than 300 employees. Again, if we go back to the intent of the Economic Aid Act, it is to support smaller businesses and harder hit businesses. And the final point, can demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. So you'll just want to look at one quarter, let's say quarter 1, 2019 versus quarter 1 of 2020. For example, you could not compare quarter 3 in 2019 versus quarter 1 in 2020. Now, let's say you were not open all of 2019. Because remember, to qualify for this program, you just had to have been in business as of February 15th, 2020. So if you're looking for a second draw, you wouldn't necessarily have, the quarters in 2019. So what you will do in that situation, if you're open the first quarter of 2020, you would compare that quarter to any of your last 3 quarters in 2020 and try to find a reduction that way. And let's say you were open in 2019, and you can't find a 25% reduction when you go down your quarters. What you could do is do annual comparison. Look at your annual gross receipts from 2019 and annual gross receipts in 2020 and try to find a 25% reduction that way. There's additional guidance on our website because this can get more complicated. For example, if you're a seasonal business, I don't have those examples off the top of my head, but if you are a seasonal business, there is guidance out there on how you could calculate that 25% reduction. So how does the process work? Okay, so we've gone over first-time borrowers, we've gone over second-time borrowers, and the gist of the program. So your number one priority, finding a lender. You can do so a couple ways. We have a lender match program. So as I was saying, there are other SBA-backed lending programs out there. So lender match is what we use to connect lenders, SBA-approved lenders to borrowers. So you go to lender match, and I'll demo that in a couple minutes. You can put in your information, and then within 48 to 72 hours, lenders will just call you. So that's one approach. Another approach is we do have a map. You can put in your zip code, and a full list of lenders near you will pop up. Another way, connect with a resource partner or ask around, word of mouth. You could ask whoever you bank with if they're an SBA lender and if they're participating in PPP. A note about lenders, because we do get this question too. So could you, if you received a loan last year and you didn't have the best experience with a lender, could you change lenders? And the answer is yes, you can. If you, for whatever reason, didn't work out with your first lender last year and you want to move to a different one, you can. My advice would be to locate your loan number from the first one. That'll make things smoother. Another input I'll give is we have heard of folks kind of getting impatient, applying to one lender and then changing their mind and going to another. I would advise against that. I would advise to just do your research. If you submit an application to multiple lenders, it's gonna cause some systematic issues on our end. It's gonna flag as a duplicate. So, and we have heard of that. So I would just say, take your time, do your research, and be intentional about which lender you go with, so you don't run into any delays if you've submitted, let's say, a couple different applications, and now you're going to have to track each one down and withdraw, and it might be a little bit messy. So just stick with one, do your research, ask around, and again, utilize our resource partners if you're not sure about that. So complete your application. Your lender will have their own system. They could have an online system of their own. So work with them on that. And then finally, the SBA will issue you a loan number, and your funds will be dispersed. And I don't have much on forgiveness here, but we do get questions on it. So how forgiveness works, there is a simplified form coming, as I said, but your first payment is deferred 10 months after the last day of your covered period. So you don't have to worry about making payments anytime soon. However, you actually have until your maturity date ends to apply for forgiveness. So you could potentially, wait 5 years. Most loans now are a 5-year maturity date. You could wait that long, but you would be, keep in mind, you'd be making payments. So up to you though, work with your team, but that's how that process works. You apply for forgiveness through your lender. Your lender then will review it, send it to the SBA. The SBA will review it, and at that point, let your lender know, how much of the loan was forgiven, if it's fully forgiven or if it's not fully forgiven. If it's not fully forgiven, I will take you to that, actually, this slide. It's not fully forgiven, so let's say you didn't stick with that 60-40 breakdown. Let's say you use the loan proceeds to expand, or you used it for anything other than the allowable expenses. Then what you're now looking at is this becomes a loan. It's a loan of an interest rate of 1%. There's no prepayment penalties though, so if you decide you want to pay it open and early and able to, you can. There's no requirement for collateral or personal guarantees. And if you were to apply for the program today, you would have a maturity date of 5 years. If you applied last year before June, it's 2 years. So if you're not sure, just ask your lender. They will be able to tell you exactly what your maturity date is. And again, if you do not apply for forgiveness at all, if you went into this program thinking this is just going to be a loan and you don't want to do forgiveness at all, your first payment starts 10 months after the last day of your covered period. Now, if you apply for forgiveness, right after your covered period end, and you submit that to your lender, they submit it to SBA. SBA lets the lender know, this much was forgiven. At that point, your payments will start once your lender communicates to you how much was forgiven. So just keep that in mind, work with your lender on that as well, and do know that an updated forgiveness form is coming. So I think I've touched on most of these items. I will just say, I'm not going to get too much into this because this is an IRS question, but expenses paid with your PPP loan funds are federally tax deductible. Consult the IRS if you have questions on that. We also are doing a few webinars with the IRS. If you have questions about how to report that, I will show you how to sign up for that if you're interested. Okay, so at this point, let me take you to some of the links I was discussing. All right, so the first place I want to show you, are you able to see my browser? Yep, okay, great. So the first place I want to show you is just sba.gov/PPP. So this is going to cover basically everything that I've talked about today. But one of the first things you'll see on the website, find a lender. So as I was saying, there's two options. You have lender match. So that if you click that first link, it'll bring you to a page that looks like this. And I'll just hit find lenders. And then you're going to put in your email and your phone number. So I would recommend this one if you were, let's say, considering other SBA loan programs. Let's say you think you want to renovate or expand. So we have a loan program for that. So maybe you want to just kind of do your research and talk to different lenders that provide different programs. So this is a great one for that. And if you are fine waiting a couple of days to get connected. So that's one way. The other way is the second bullet, search for lenders in your area. So this is a great one if you're looking to just see what paycheck protection lenders are near you. And maybe you want to do some research on them or ask around or whatever, give them a call and see which one's right for you. This is great because it gives you a full list of lenders near you. And as I said, it has a phone number, their website's usually linked for most of them, and their name. So that's another way you can go. And then the other aspect I want to show you about this website are a couple different things. So I like it because it's a full breakdown. So you have first draw PPP loans, you have your second draw forgiveness. So both the forgiveness forms can be found on this tab, lender information and data. So we're going to start just at first draw PPP loans. And again, to get here, it's just sba.gov/PPP. So if you scroll down, it tells you everything we've talked about, the loan details, if your loan's not forgiven, who qualifies, and then how and when to apply. So a few things here. I like this, that it lists the Paycheck Protection Program first draw borrower application form. So remember, you're going to apply through your lender, but it may be a good idea to just look at the application so you know what they're asking of you, what documentation you need, so you're just familiar with it. But again, go through your lender to actually submit it. But just take a quick breeze through here if helpful for you, just so you know what's going to be expected of you. So that's on our website. Another thing I wanted to show you. So we have a frequently asked questions for lenders and borrowers you could take a look at. But this third document, how to calculate your first draw PPP loan amount and what documentation to provide. So I like this because we all have different situations and business types. So it's sometimes helpful to just look at examples. So the first question says here, I am self-employed, I have no employees. How do I calculate my maximum first draw loan amount? So the answer, this is what you'll first need to do. First, find your 2019 IRS Form 1040, Schedule C, line 31, which is your net profit amount. So a note here, I don't think I've mentioned this. So if the amount is over 100,000, you just need to reduce it to 100,000. So for example, if your net profit was 200,000 or 150,000, for purposes of this program, the maximum amount it can be is 100,000. So reduce that to 100,000. And if your amount is zero, you are not eligible for PPP. So unfortunately you had to have made a profit. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a way for us to determine a loan amount. Once you find that, calculate your average monthly net profit amount. So you'll take that net that net profit amount, divide it by 12. That's going to give you your average monthly amount, and then multiply that by 2.5. So that's your maximum loan amount. So and then it breaks down to further. There's other scenarios. I'm self-employed and I have employees, for example. So it breaks that down. The third one, I'm a self-employed farmer, rancher. So it's a great document, or how do partnerships apply. I would definitely recommend going through it. And it probably has a scenario similar to yours that could help you work through that. Okay. I think that's all I wanted to touch on that program. Let's just go back to SBA.gov/PPP. So it has similar resources for second draw loans, second time borrowers. Same type of application as well, frequently asked questions, and then calculating your maximum loan amount. Let me just see if there's anything on forgiveness that I wanted to show you. Yeah, so I like this tab because it does break down forgiveness. You know, another thing I don't think I mentioned, so for forgiveness, you want to also make sure that your employee and compensation levels are maintained. So to have the PPP loan forgiven, you can't reduce your employee's salary by more than 25%. You also have to maintain the same full-time or employee headcount. So they calculate that. For example, a part-time employee, they calculate that. It's not the same as a full-time employee, but essentially the gist is you want to keep the numbers the same. There are safe harbors in effect. So let's say you couldn't bring back all of your employees to pre-pandemic levels, so that same number, because maybe you couldn't fully open, or maybe there were federal or state local guidelines preventing you from doing so, or maybe you tried to hire back your employees, but they had accepted another job, or they couldn't, or there's even provisions if an employee was fired or did something like that. So there are safe harbors in effect if you cannot maintain your salary levels and your full-time headcount levels. So that will take you, when you go through the forgiveness application, they will ask you those questions and it breaks down for you. But that is something to keep in mind. Remember, the Paycheck Protection Program, it was designed to keep employees on your payroll. So that is a huge part of forgiveness. You want to make sure you are maintaining the same salaries and the same full-time headcounts. So I think that is a gist on Paycheck Protection Program. So I will now briefly touch on our other programs, and then we'll open it up for some questions. So we also have our COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, also known as EIDL. So this was launched in the CARES Act. This is completely separate from Paycheck Protection Program, so we kind of have to shift gears here. This is a loan. This is a working capital loan. This is not forgivable. This is not a grant. Fortunately, some folks get them confused, so I just want to reiterate that this is a loan from the SBA. You do not go through a PPP lender for this program. Again, this is not forgivable. It's not a grant. This is a loan, but the terms are very flexible. So you have a 3.75% for businesses and 2.75% for our nonprofits. And actually, I don't think I have it up here, but your first loan payment is actually deferred for 12 months after you receive your disbursement. So it's great flexibility. It was just extended. It was originally set to close December 31st, 2020, but it has been extended to December 31st, 2021. You apply online, covid19relief.sba.gov, and it is working capital. So this could not be used to renovate or expand or do anything like that. This is strictly working capital. Now, if you received an EIDL loan already last year and you want to apply for an increase, you can. I will put that in the chat. You just need to email our reconsideration team. You could also call customer service up here on for more information, but it's just pdcrecons@sba.gov. That's if you've already received this loan and you've already used all your funds and you want to apply for an increase. For EIDL, you can apply for more than one. It's only one EIDL loan per business, but if you have multiple businesses, you can have multiple EIDLs. So that's the gist on that. You can have a PPP and an EIDL loan. You can double dip. The only rule is that you can't use the loan proceeds for the same things, which if you are applying today, I don't see how you would, because Paycheck Protection, again, is really focused on payroll costs, and then the EIDL would just be your kind of working capital. So that's that. I will touch on this a little bit. So this, as I mentioned, we do have 2 grant programs now at the SBA. So we have the Targeted EIDL Advance. Now remember, the EIDL Advance came back with the CARES Act. It was a one-time emergency grant up to $10,000 for small businesses. that funding ran out in July. So there were a lot of people who were approved for the target or for the EIDL advance, but they didn't receive the funds because funding ran out. Or there were a lot of people who received a portion of the 10,000, but not the full 10,000. It was based off the number of employees you had. So it was 1,000 per employee essentially. So now what the SBA is doing, they're reaching out to the people who did not receive the EIDL advance but applied, and for the people who received the EIDL advance but not the full 10,000. In addition to having already applied, there are other 3 important criteria that must be met. Number 1, business must be located in a low-income community. Number 2, must have suffered greater than 30% economic loss. And number 3, has 300 or fewer employees. So that's the gist on that program. The SBA is contacting applicants directly with instructions on next steps and how to apply and what would be asked of you. This is just more items that may be asked from the applicant, your federal tax return, gross receipts. And if you are one of the among the people who are being contacted regarding this program, my advice is just to review everything very carefully. If there are any errors, we see this a lot with banking. For example, if your banking information doesn't match the business information, that's going to flag the system, and that's going to really just delay, the funds. So my advice, if you are among the group that's being contacted, really take your time, really ensure everything is correct. Again, our resource partners could assist you with that, or your team. If you have any questions about this program, you can contact Targeted Advance at SBA.gov. And there's also more information on our website, and I'll show you that as well. And then finally, our final program, Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. So this is another grant. It's going to be for our theater producers, live venue operators, performing arts organizations, museum operators, zoos, talent representatives. So a lot of different items that this program covers, but in order to qualify, you must be an eligible entity. And plus, you must have been in operation as of February 29th, 2020. So a big note about this program, it's not actually open yet. We're not accepting applications. We just wanted to make the public aware that this program is out there. And another very, very huge update. So you cannot apply for Paycheck Protection Program after December 27, 2020, and also be considered for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. So the reasoning behind that is the SBA is trying to assist this industry that has been very, very impacted by this pandemic. So the idea behind it is if you are eligible for Paycheck Protection Program, they want to leave enough space and slots for those industries and those businesses that maybe aren't eligible for a Paycheck Protection Program grant. So that is very important though, because even if you apply again for Paycheck Protection Program after December 27th, the act of applying would disqualify you for consideration for this program. So just really want to make you aware of that. If you're considering the two and you're not sure, again, a resource partner would be great to talk through that, or I'll show you some other resources as well to go to, but just really think through that. But if you received a PPP loan last year, you're fine and you're thinking about this program, that doesn't disqualify you. It's just the new round. The new round, you cannot apply for that and apply for this program. And this program, the amount of your grant you will receive is based off of your, I believe it's your gross receipts. Let's go to it right now and check it out. So another website, sba.gov/coronavirus relief. I like this because it goes over everything. I know we've talked about a lot, so it can get confusing on which program is which. So if you just scroll down, you get a clear breakdown of all the programs we've talked about. And it's just really convenient. So if we just go to SBO grant program, that's the one we were just talking about. It's great because it tells you your program details. So it's going to be the maximum grant you could receive 45% of your gross earned revenue. That's what you qualify for. It's up to 10 million. But again, it is very strict on eligible entities. You could scroll down here to see that. And if you go up right here, there's a frequently asked questions document, which goes over a lot of questions that people have. But again, this program is not open yet, just letting you know that it's coming. And if you're interested, make sure to do your research. Okay, we've touched on this. The only programs with the SBA that conflicts is that Shuttered Venue Operators Grant and PPP. You can't have both, remember that. Otherwise, you can have a PPP, you can have an EIDL, just do not use the loan proceeds for the same purpose. And the final update is SKBacked loan debt relief. So this is for existing borrowers. Like I said, we have several SBA lending programs here at the SBA. So let's say you have a 7A loan with us. Basically, when the CARES Act launched, the SBA was paying 6 months of principal and interest, basically paying your loan payments for you for 6 months. Now that has been extended. It's based off of when you signed your loan. Like if you I believe the cutoff is September 27, 2020. That was the last day. But it's extended now, 3 months, an additional 3 months in some cases, and in some cases, additional 5 months. If you're among this group, your lender would have already contacted you and be letting you know that your payments are continued to be deferred. All right, so I know that took a while. That is all I have. I will just go to one place to show you local assistance, sba.gov/local assistance, just because as I was saying, you may need help applying for some of these programs. Maybe you need help figuring out if you meet that 25% reduction for the second draw. So I would always recommend our resource partner. So it's just sba.gov/local assistance. So similar to how to find a PPP lender, you can find a resource partner by just putting your zip code in and hitting search, and a full list of resource partners near you will show up. So our small business development centers, they are business professionals. They provide one-on-one assistance, technical assistance. They're all virtual. Give them a call, and again, 100% free. Set up an appointment. Maybe you need, someone to look at, and like I said, maybe you need someone to help you figure out, do you meet that 25% reduction? Or maybe you need some input. Should I apply for Shuttered Venue? Should I apply for PPP? And they could provide that input. And I like them too, because they are stationed in the community, so they really have local ties. So give one near you a call if you need some assistance. And that's the final thing I wanted to show you, because they are a wonderful resource that you can definitely utilize. Okay, so we have some time, and I want to go to our chat now. Okay, what about one question I'm seeing in the chat? So what about those who have applied for first round forgiveness? We have an issue with withdrawing that through E-Trans, yeah, making it impossible to request a first round increase. Yeah, so thank you for that question. We have heard that there's been some issues with the first draw increase. Right now, a lot of lenders are having some systematic issues. We at the SBA, we've been hosting some trainings and trying to resolve some of those error codes that are being populating. So we hear you, and I apologize for any inconvenience you're experiencing. A couple things I would say. If this is a borrower. Okay, make sure your lender is communicating with the SBA. If your lender has any questions, have them contact us, because we have been providing that guidance, because there have been some kind of systematic issues with E-Trans and whatnot, especially for that first round increase. So we are working on it. Is a long way of saying that we are working on it. We hear you and apologize for that inconvenience, but we are working on that. And can you apply for first draw increase and use funds retroactively, and also apply for second draw? Yeah, this is a great question. That's another one that we have actually this morning had a quick meeting about that question of, if you apply for an increase, number one, what is your covered period? And two, is it better to do a first draw increase or apply for a second draw? So we don't have an answer as of yet. One of our key supervisory lender relations specialists is on leave today, and but we did actually route that to him. It's funny you asked that just this morning. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. So please follow up with me. I want to make sure your question does get answered. So I put that, and that goes to anybody on this call. If you have a question or a situation that you don't want to ask, please feel free to email me. If I don't know the answer, I'll route it to my team, and we'll get you an answer as soon as we can.
We have hit the 11 o'clock hour. So what we'll do with this presentation, we will get it produced and packaged so that we'll put this and make it available on through our website and our member portal and our YouTube channel. But definitely, if you have questions, Darrah, you mentioned that you'd be sending out a little video about the forgiveness program. I'll wait till I get that from you, and then we'll send it out to everyone, including the link to this, so that if folks missed it, because there's some folks who weren't able to join us this morning, so they can see it, as well as getting the forgiveness. Because I know everybody loves to get emails from the chamber, but if we can like minimize that to a certain extent, that would be great. So
okay, yeah, I will certainly. So I'll send a follow-up email with just some resources, a link to our forgiveness webinar that's been recorded, and anything else I can think of, I'll just throw that in there and I'll send that your way.
Okay, great, appreciate that.
Yeah.
We thank everybody for coming out this morning. Definitely, if you come across folks that are in need of this information, definitely reach out to us, to Darren. We can help get that information to them, because like you said, Jonathan, this information has just it's been a bit fast and furious on the different changes and nuances of the programs. And if we can help provide information and get it out, then we definitely would love to do that. So we'll have, Darrah, she's included her email address in the chat. We'll also include her contact information in the email we'll send out a little bit later. But definitely, everybody have a fantastic weekend. Stay warm. I think we can all say as a state that we could stand for a little bit of warmth. And we'll just catch everybody later.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.